In this example, we're going to use API Wizard to update vendor site payment terms. This is a simple use case for API Wizard where there is something very specific that we want to update. In this case, the payment term attribute for vendor site records. You can contrast this to more comprehensive uses of API Wizard, such as creating new vendors or suppliers where you enter potentially dozens of fields, or a more comprehensive update loader where you can update all of the vendor attributes. But in this particular use case, we're simply going to use API Wizard to update vendor site payment terms. Because the vendors and vendor sites already exist in Oracle, I'm going to use an extraction report to pull that information out. This saves me from having to do any data entry. I can do that by going to the API Wizard menu in Excel and choosing the extraction option, which is this little circle icon. That opens up the API Wizard report control panel, and I can see here in the bottom left-hand corner that there are some parameters for my extraction, vendor name, site code, and operating unit. I'm going to enter an operating unit of Vision Operations, and then I'm going to run this to bring the data back into Excel. You can add additional parameters. API Wizard is a very flexible solution, so if you needed to have an extraction based on a flex field or on vendor type or whatever, you can easily add those to the parameters for the extract. You can see here that I've brought back a number of vendors, and for many of those vendors, there are multiple sites. The operating unit for everybody is Vision Operations because that's what I used as my extraction criteria. And I can see the current payment terms for all of these guys are 30 net. Now my objective here is to modify the payment terms. If I knew the payment term name that I wanted to update them to, I could just type it in. So for instance, if the term was net 60 and I knew that was it, I can just type that in and copy that down and quickly process. If I'm not sure what the term's name is, or if I want to be sure that I've spelt it correctly, I can use the list of values or the LOV. So I'm going to double click on cell E8, the cell that I'm hovering above. And when I do that, it opens up a list of values. And this list of values has a parameter. I'm going to put in a wildcard and say query. And it shows me all of the valid payment terms for this operating unit. So I'm going to choose 60 net because I wanted a 60-day payment term. And I'll say OK. And then it returns that value into my Excel loader. I can then take this and copy and paste it down for all of the records. They don't all need to be the same, so if I wanted to, I can go one by one and use the LOV to pick different terms. I'll set up different terms, let's say for ABC Office. Let's say we want to have them have immediate payment terms. I could type in immediate, or once again, I can use my LOV by double-clicking. This time I'll put in a partial value of IMM and a wildcard. You'll see that it just brings back immediate. That's the only matching term for IMM. I'll say OK, and it loads immediate into my loader. Let's say that I'd also like to show you an error. So what I'm going to do for one of these records, let's say for Abbott Laboratories, I'm going to give them a payment term of just some random letters, which definitely will not be a valid payment term in my system. I can process any record that has a Y or a yes in it up to the, and so if I want to stop at a particular row, let's say I want to stop after advanced network devices, I can just put in a blank value in row 26, and API Wizard will process rows 8 through 25 for me. If there were particular rows that I wanted to skip, I can change the upload flag to no for those rows, and it would skip them. Okay, I'm ready to process. I've got my data already. That was pretty quick. To process my data, I go to the API Wizard toolbar and I choose the second icon from the left. Here you can see I get a confirmation message. This tells me what's about to happen. I'm going to process 18 rows in the Viz environment. 18 rows is API Wizard's count of the records that have a Y or a yes in the upload column up to the first blank value. Viz is the name of the Oracle instance that I'm connected to. So this might be your prod or QA or test instance. And it asks if I want to continue. Before I continue, I'll just quickly point out that as API Wizard runs, it takes this data and it will pass it to Oracle in real time. It goes to what's called an Oracle integration point, in this case a public API, that takes responsibility for performing the data validation. So Oracle is doing the data validation of this data, same data validation as if you were entering your data through the Oracle forms. As this runs, we're going to see each row processed in real time, and we'll get a status in the status column of either S or E. S for success, E for error. Additionally, if the record is successfully processed, the whole row gets colored in blue. If there's an error, the whole row gets colored in red. Also, if there's an error, we'll see some message information in the messages column. Okay, so we're ready to process. I'm going to just say yes. And here we can see API Wizard starting to process, S for success, and the blue font also indicating that the records are processed successfully. As we hit the error in row 22, you can see that there's an E in the status column and the whole row is colored in red. When the process finishes, I get what's called the execution summary that tells us what happened. 18 records processed, 17 successes, and 1 error. At this point, I can either save or cancel. Since this mostly worked, I'm going to save by hitting the commit button. And now I have saved those 17 changes. I do have 1 error. As we can see here, if I scroll over to the right, the error message that we got is term's name is invalid, payment term is inconsistent, and of course we expected that. I could use the LOV to find a different value, but in this case I'm going to just take the 60 net from the row above it, paste it down below. I'll use the execute button again. By default, API Wizard knows I want to process the 1 row that failed in the last run. I could reprocess everything or a different subset of data, but this is what I want, so I'll say yes. Now 1 record processed, 1 success, hit the commit button to save, and I'm done. So real quick, simple way to update my vendor site payment terms. For those of you familiar with doing this in Oracle, you know it's pretty tedious, especially in R12 in the HTML forms, navigating from one vendor to another and even one vendor site to another site is painful and tedious. Here I can do that work quick and easy, all in one shot in API Wizard.